Alrighty, so we're going to pick up where we left off on creating a conservative budget. And we're going to look at this example here. So Marcel works as a clerk in a hardware store during the day. In the evenings, he supplements his income by tutoring young students in mathematics. Marcel would like to save money each month for a proposed trip to Europe next year. Marcel has reviewed his income and expenses for the last 6 months. Now the following chart summarizes Marcel's income and expenses for the last 6 months, and we are going to use that to help Marcel create a conservative budget. So we have a chart of all of his expenses here and his income, and that's what we are going to use to create said budget. So step one is we need to estimate monthly income. So to do that, what we're going to do is add up all of his income for each month, and then we're going to divide it by however many months there are to get an average, okay? So we are going to do that. You can pause it and you can do that ahead of me, okay? So while you were paused, I did a little bit of adding. Hopefully we got to the same answer here. This $2,110 times 6, that is his regular income. This down here is I added up his 6 months worth of tutoring. So now I'm going to add these two together and then hopefully get an average. All right, so my 1275, add that to, what was that number? 12,660. All right, so that is that is his total income for 6 months. So 139,351. But that is for 6 months. To get an average, we're going to take that and divide it by how many months? That was 6. So we're going to take that, divide it by 6, and ta-da, that is our monthly average, 2,322.50. Right, that is my average income. Cool. Step 2. Average expense categories. All right. So some of these will be easy, some of these will require a little bit more work. So the first one is nice and easy because it is a recurring expense. So rent. If I go back to my chart, rent is the same every month. You see, rent is 600, rent is 600, rent is 600, rent is 600. So that's the same, whoops, every single month. So we know what that one is, right? Just an easy $600. That's sloppy. I'll write that neatly if I can. All right. Now some of these other ones will be a little bit more difficult. So to take an average, so that's what we're doing here, we're going to add up for each month and then divide by 6. Okay. So for food, 285, 345, 310, 295, 318, and 328. So we're going to add all those together and divide it by 6. All right. So I'm just going to write those down here. 285 plus 345 plus 310 plus 295 plus 318 plus 328. So I'm going to add all those together. Just move that down here. All right. 285 plus 345 plus 310 plus 295 plus 318 plus 328 All right, 1,881. But remember, we're going for an average, so we're going to divide that by 6. All right, so I'm going to take that number, divided by 6. There we go, $313.50. All right, so now I want you to pause the video and go through that for each category because I'm not going to write down all the steps. I'm just going to write down the answers, okay? So go ahead and pause it and work those out for us. All right, so hopefully you got all those calculated out for us. I just want to go over one more thing before I show you what all my calculations were for averages, is we were supposed to be predicting monthly amounts. So for rent, we know it's going to be 600 every month. Now for food, it varied. So we want to pick a nice round number. Instead of this assuming that's going to be $313.50, we want to have a nicer, rounder number. Now, because we're doing a conservative budget, we're always going to round this number up. So I'm going to round this number to, well, 313. I'm going to round it to $320. Okay, that's a nice number, and that way I will always have, most of the time, a little bit extra in that category. All right, now I'm going to show you how I calculated all the other categories here. I didn't actually use a calculator, I used a spreadsheet. So I have my categories, and then I have my 6 expenses, and then what I did to take the average, there's a neat little function, and this is the same for Excel. You just go equals, and I want the average. What do I want the average of? Well, I want the average of these things. Whoops. The average of, make sure you put your bracket, of those things. And it spits out your average. All right, so now I'm going to put these onto our notes here, okay? So my vehicle average was $382.50. So I'm going to round that, because we wanted to estimate and we're rounding up. I'm going to round that to $390. Okay. Right, next categories. Insurance. Insurance was a recurring expense. It was $200 every month, so we don't need to round that. We know it's going to be $200 for every month. Clothing, it worked out to $180.83. So we're going to round that. Again, I like to round up every time, so I'm going to round up to the nearest 10. Or not to the nearest 10, I'm going to round up to the next 10, so I'm going to round that to $190. And I know what you're thinking, you're breaking all the rounding rules here. That's okay. So our entertainment category, that was $258.33. So we're going to round that to $260. And then my other category was $310. And you could either leave it at 310 because it's already a nice number, but since we're in the habit, I'm actually going to round that, because we're trying to make a conservative budget, I'm going to round that to $320. Hopefully this all works out. All right, so what's our next steps? All right, analyze our budget. So determine the sum of our predicted expenses. So I'm going to do this the same way I did our averages. I'm going to use my spreadsheet. So I am, all right, going to make a new column here. So my rent was $600. My food, we were budgeting for 320. My vehicle, we were budgeting for 390. All right, my insurance, that was recurring at 200. Clothing, we budgeted for 190. Entertainment, we budgeted for 260. And my other category, we budgeted 320. Right, so to figure out the sum of all this, right, so you hit the equals button, put a bracket, or equal, tell it what you want. I want the sum of all those things I just typed in. So that was the sum of all of these numbers. Right, 2,280. That was what we're guessing here. 2,280. Right, is this number higher than the monthly income? So let's go back. What was our average monthly income? It was $2,322. So is it higher? Nope. We're all good. Right, so now we're going to have a little bit left over. So in order to make this a conservative budget, we need to figure out how much is actually left over. So I'm just going to do a little bit of subtraction here. It doesn't line up very well, but we'll assume it does. All right, I'm not going to do this the scenic route, but you're going to subtract these to figure out how much is saved. So I'm just going to pull up my calculator here, wherever it is. So it was 22.5. And we're going to subtract 2,280. So $42.50. This goes into a new category because we didn't spend it. That goes into our savings. All right. Now our last step is to take all this information and put it in a nice form. Okay, organize it in a nice and pretty way. So we're going to put all of our numbers in here. And most importantly, at the very, very bottom, once you add everything up, these two numbers are going to be the same. That's how we made this budget. We did that on purpose. So let's go ahead and organize it all pretty like, okay? So I'm going to actually type just to make it look pretty still. Our regular income, that was always the same. That was always $2,210. Our variable income, if we go back, well, this is how much it was in all 6 months. To figure out the average, we're going to take that number and divide it by 6. All right, so let's do that real quick. 1275 divided by 6. All right, $212.50. All right. Now we just have to put our expenses in. We already know what this is going to total up to. It is going to total up to 23? No. 24, 22.5. Let's double check. Is that what we set up here? 23, 22. Whoops. There, fixed. Right now we just have to put all our expenses in, and if we add them up, we'll see that the total needs to match. That's why we put all of our extra money in the savings category. Right, so our rent Our rent was always 600. At our food, we were budgeting 320. Our vehicle, we were budgeting 390. Our insurance was always 200. And our clothing, we were budgeting for 190, if I remember correctly. Yep. Entertainment was 260, and other was 320. 260 or 360? 260, 320. $320. And whatever we had left over was in our savings. That was like $42 or something. $42.50. All right. If we added all those up, we'd see that it's the same. So this is what our conservative budget is. This is what the numbers need to be. Our expenses need to stay under. All right. Now, if we stick to this budget, we'll have a savings of $42.50 every month. Now, that may take a while to get up to that vacation that Marcel was working for. However, it's still a savings, which is awesome. All right. So now what I want you to do is, using that budget we made, is to go through these self-check questions. All right, and make sure you check your answers. Ask me if you have questions. Thanks.